Amar, would you just be speaking, or you have any presentation or nothing?
No, I don't believe in slides.
Perfect. I know, I knew that.
So it's already 8:30, and I am going to please allow me to mute all. I have muted all, and meeting is going to start. I will request speakers to unmute themselves and mute immediately after meeting is over. So meeting call to order. Please rise for national anthem. Very good morning, friends. We are going to start the meeting. Before meeting, I have two announcements. One is regarding directory of members of Rotary Club Pune Riverside. Prerna has already shared the field and the PDF. I will request all these team members to please check thoroughly all the fields, and if there is any correction or omission, please supplement. And the time which we have requested with all members is 12th. 13 we have to give it to printer for final action. That's one thing. Second, as you all know, installation ceremony is scheduled on coming Wednesday, 18th. That is in Kharadi. Venue has been shared with you. So please make it sure to reach. That is going to start with fellowship at 6, and meeting is this installation ceremony is going to start sharp at 7. That will be for just 90 minutes. We will doing within that. 8:30 onwards there will be cocktail and dinner. So I request all the members to please make copy paste and give your name, member's name also, family member's name also. On this issue, in fact, I will invite Prerna to say more. So over to Prerna.
Very good morning to everyone once again. I'm just going to elaborate a little on what Colonel Mishra has already told you all. We've come out with the members directory for 2020-2021. We would also request you to not miss out on filling the fields of blood group, because many times, I mean, seeing the way things are going these days, we need someone, or someone is in help of blood or something. Just go through the directory. You'll probably find someone who will be able to help you. We also have fields like classification, which many of us have left blank. Classification would be a broad classification of the work that you're doing, probably an entrepreneur, probably in business. If you want to share some more details about that, please do fill that in, because most of us have left that column blank. This needs to be printed at the earliest. So if I don't get any corrections or amendments by the 12th night, I'm going to take it as all the information that has been put in is correct, and it's going to be sent to the printer. So no changes will be made after 12th night. So please make sure you all have edited and changed and checked all your details thoroughly. The second thing that we come to is the installation. I think we've all been on a long hiatus just meeting on Zoom. So it's going to be great meeting everyone physically after, I think, a good long 9 months. We start at 7 sharp, like Colonel said. 6 to 7 is high tea and registration. I would request all the names to be sent in to me in advance, yours, your family members, whoever's attending with you is. The hotel has asked us for a list of names of all the people attending. They also have some protocols to follow, so we need that list to be given in advance. It would be great if you all could all just share it on the group once again. So I have a final list which I can share to them a day before our installation. So we don't have any untoward incident that day. Someone's name is missing. The hotel comes looking, saying you're not on the list. So looking forward to seeing all of you for the installation. Since we have our installation on next Wednesday, we will not be having our weekly club meeting. The weekly club meeting will follow the Wednesday after that. Thank you so much, Colonel. Back to you.
Thank you very much. Before finally I invite Ganeshji for formal welcome of our keynote speaker of the day, I would like to welcome on behalf of Riverside the participants. Prajwal Samant is there, Ravi Acharya, Aditya Mane, Vaishnavi Suryavanshi, Som Singte, Neha Kumari, Saurabh Pandey, Sumit Maurya, Dinesh Bhati. These are all lovely students who have joined, and they are part of the Sanjeevani group, which is the flagship project of the Rotary Riverside. They are equally eager as we are eager to listen great MR today. So once again, welcoming, giving a hearty welcome to MR Rangaswamy sir. So please, now I invite, not taking much time, I invite Ganeshji for doing the honor of introducing and welcoming him. Over to Ganeshji.
Sure. Thank you very much, Colonel Mishra, and good morning to all of you, including the students who have joined. And of course, good evening to you, MR, and thank you so much. It was a real pleasure for us that MR, a personality of your stature, has agreed to address our Rotary Club, because I think it's important for us to hear views from all over the world. And thanks to Zoom and thanks to COVID, I think we've been able to completely wide base the kind of spectrum of speakers we've had in our club. So thank you for joining us today. For the benefit of the students, I must say that the reason I'm very, very fond of MR and I'm a great fan of his is he represents, I think, what all of us aspire to become and many of us become, which is to be a truly multifaceted personality. Because I think life is too short for all of us to just focus on doing one thing, whether it's work or anything else. And MR, I think over the last few decades, has really shown us what it means to be a multidimensional personality. I mean, it's there in the introduction, so I'm not going to read out the introduction. But I first knew him as a software business expert because he really is very tuned into the information technology industry worldwide. And living in Silicon Valley in America, obviously you have to be there. Living in Silicon Valley in America, he I think also understands the value of funding, because in India, we suffered a long time in our industry because the kind of funding that is available in Silicon Valley or various parts of the world was just not there today. So I think MR has actually been one of the first initial angel funders in the world, because the Sandhill Group, which he kind of co-founded, played a very, very big role in making that happen. Probably one of his most significant initiatives is what he is very passionate about, and I'm also a part of. It's called Indiaspora. And the concept of Indiaspora, which is a non-profit, was to unite the Indian diaspora in the US. And of course, as you know, there are many, many, many people who are now very, very influential members of American society. And not only has MR played a stellar role in integrating that community, but he has also enabled many of us who understand both India and the US to appreciate each other better, appreciate the nuances of American culture, and for people living for a very long time in America, to understand the nuances of Indian culture. So really to be able to contribute to causes. So I think MR is playing a significant role in just building the bridges between the two greatest democracies in the world. In fact, 2 years back when I was in the US, MR actually hosted a session inside Washington, DC, where we met many of the Indian congressmen, met many people. So it's actually amazing to see how much of interlinkages MR has been able to build. Finally, MR, of course, himself is very active with the philanthropy sector. He's been a board member, as you've seen there, of Kailash Satyarthi, our Nobel Laureate's Children's Foundation, the Nudge Foundation, which, like SVP, does a lot of work in philanthropy, in livelihoods, the Wish Foundation, and also has been recognized by many, many people as one of the influential leaders of India, of the US, and of course around the world. In fact, you see MR occasionally even on Indian TV channels, which shows you the extent of involvement he has. Last but not the least, of course, he's been very close to the current president-elect and the vice president-elect. So I promised him I'll bother him at the end of it by asking him to just share maybe some personal thought about Kamala Harris and Joe Biden. But the main topic of today, which is what I'm going to request MR you to talk about, is what is the whole concept of philanthropy and what is the US-India philanthropy movement that you're seeing, and specifically, of course, what you. So I think MR, we have about, maybe you can just speak for about 25-30 minutes, and then of course, if you have time, we'll ask you a few questions. So we'll take it from you. Over to you, MR. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone from San Francisco.
Very good morning.
And Colonel Mishra, thank you for having me. Ganesh, thank you for those kind words and flattering remarks. It's a pleasure to be here. I have a vested interest in Rotary itself, and that's why when Ganesh called and asked me to speak to all of you, my late brother was a very active Rotary member in Chennai and was a governor for a while as well. So, and I was just talking to a friend of mine this evening who said many organizations, there have been studies done on organizations over time, whether it's trade unions or other organizations, and most organizations have declined in membership. And one of the main culprits has been television. That's not a surprise. But Rotary has been singled out as one of the few organizations where memberships has been steady and in many places actually increased. So I'm laud you for getting together and being part of a community as opposed to watching television. Thank you for having me. I won't spend 30 minutes talking. I really like to keep this interactive. But let me start by giving you a little bit about why I started this organization called Indiaspora. And the website, for those of you who are curious, especially the students, it's indiaspora.org. So it's India, I-N-D-I-A, Spora, S-P-O-R-A.org. So just go take a look at it. And I'm an entrepreneur. I like to create communities and networks that make an impact. And Indiaspora is one of my, I call it newer organizations. It's only 8 years old. My first network is almost 23 years old. My second network is 13 years old. And this is my third network that I started. The reason I did Indiaspora was not that the Indian American community in the US needed yet another organization, but there was a void in the types of Indian organizations that were present in the US. There were many organizations, when I looked into it, who were based on ethnic requirements. Gujarati Samaj, Tamil Sangam, and so on and so forth. Or there were professional organizations like people, TIE does entrepreneurship, Saba does a group of lawyers get together, API gets all the doctors together, and so on and so forth. But there was not one organization that was inclusive and brought the entire community together. Doctors, lawyers, tech folks, billionaires, academics, artists, so on and so forth. And that's what the void that Indiaspora intended to fill when we started in 2012. So when we got started, our members, it's a membership-driven organization, much like Rotary. What our members told us was to focus on 3 different issues. The first one that Ganesh mentioned was politics. One of the, when we started in 2012, for example, we were 1% of the population. Everybody used to brag in the US. We're 1% of the US population. We're the highest earning demographic. We are 7% of the doctors. We're 10% of the IT workforce, so on and so forth. But when asked a question, how influential are you? We had 0 representation in politics in the United States Congress. So one of the first aspirational goals Indiaspora took on was if you're 1% of the population, we at least need to be 1% of the US Congress. So over the next 3-4 election cycles, our network gave hundreds of thousands of dollars to anybody with an Indian name, whether it's Krishnamurthy or Khanna or Jayapal or Bera. We wrote checks to all these candidates who are standing for office. And in 2017, we had a big gala in Washington, DC, where there was the Indiaspora group getting together. We had over 500 people. The speaker, Nancy Pelosi, attended. Many different senators and congressmen attended to recognize, indeed, we were 5 people in Congress, which is 1% of the US Congress. But again, that was not our only goal. We also get involved in community issues. For example, Diwali is coming up next week. So I wish you an early Diwali, but you will be shocked to know that in the United States, There was no stamp for the Diwali festival. There was a stamp for Hanukkah, a stamp for Christmas, a stamp for Eid, but there was no stamp for Diwali, which is celebrated by over 1 billion people in the world. So one of the organizations, many organizations tried to kind of get a stamp, but nobody ever succeeded. And in about 2014, they came to us and said, can Indiaspora help get a stamp? So we set about it very differently. We said we need to have a marketing plan. We need to have a campaign. And so we set about pulling a program together that, first of all, for those of you who are in sales and marketing, like Ganesh and others will know, you have to sell from the top. So the first person we met was President Obama at that time and got his support that, yes, indeed, we needed the Diwali stamp. But just the president saying, I support a stamp doesn't mean you get a stamp. You have to go through a whole process. The next thing was I almost became a lobbyist, which is a very US profession, which says you got to work with congressmen and senators to get legislation introduced. So we actually got symbolic legislation introduced in the House and Senate to say, US Postal Service, please issue a stamp. But that didn't get a stamp issued either. We needed then to get the public to ask the US Postal Service to actually get a stamp. And this was not an easy task. The previous group that had actually campaigned on this actually did it the way the tech community would do. They had a change.org petition. They said, we need to get a stamp. They got 400,000 people to sign a petition to get a stamp. They then sent the petition to the US Postmaster General, who quickly noted that it was 400,000 times 50 cents, that she had lost $200,000 of revenue because everybody signed an online petition. And why would people who sign an online petition ever want to use a stamp? Of course, the stamp didn't get issued. So we took the old-fashioned approach to get people to write letters and postcards. And we got 20,000 people to write letters and postcards and fill the desk of the Postmaster General. And in 2016, finally, we got our wish. There's a Diwali stamp. If all of you want to get a stamp, you can go look at it at diwalistamp.com. And now we have a stamp. But this is not just a symbolic gesture for the Indian community. It made us mainstream, because once you have a stamp, you're part of the overall American community. So that was one of the other things we got involved is in community issues. More recently, we've been involved in issues like Black Lives Matter, for example. It's a big issue in the US. Racial justice is a big issue. Indiaspora is playing a role, calling out racial discrimination and doing work in this area to work with Black people, to work with the Hispanic community, to people of color, because we are indeed not whites, we are brown. And so that was another thing we got involved. And finally, to the topic at hand, which is philanthropy. The Indiaspora group is a very affluent group because the Indian American person makes on average $120,000 a year. Just to give you comparison, an average American makes $50,000 a year. We make more than twice what an average American makes. So it is incumbent on us to give back more than our fair share. So we started with that premise. If we indeed make this much money, how much money are we giving back? That was a question people asked. So we did a survey and we got over 1,000 respondents. And much to our chagrin, the response was not that positive. Indian Americans said they give less than the American average in terms of giving back. And this was not a good thing. But some of the positive things that came out of the survey was Indian Americans volunteered more than the average American, more than twice the average American. So what we couldn't do in money, we gave in time, which was a very positive thing. Now we looked into the money part. Why do Indian Americans not give as much or say they don't give as much? I think some of it goes to what is counted as charity. In the US, what is counted as charity is you get a tax deduction. That means you've given to charity. What this means is if we send money to our relatives in India, to our grandparents, our poor brothers and sisters and uncles and aunts, that does not count as charity because we're remitting money to India. That's not a tax deductible event. So some of the money goes to that. We also found people are not willing to give money because there's a trust deficit. People say that if we send money to India to charitable causes, that the money gets siphoned off by people. It doesn't actually go to the cause. So we have to build up a confidence that if people do contribute to charities in India, the money is actually being used. That was another reason why people were not contributing. The third reason was they didn't have role models. They didn't see many, many people in public life making big, big contributions. Our Jewish people in the US make those kind of contributions where buildings are named after them, symphony halls are named after them, large edifices are named after them, and that motivates other people to give money. And we give less money because we think our friends are giving less money. So we got to change that perception to give more money. So these are all the things we're trying to do. And then our members came to us and said, Indiaspora has to take a goal, just like we did in politics. To be 1% of the politicians, we have to set a goal. So Indiaspora has now set a goal to say we'll double the giving and impact that the diaspora community makes. So let me give you a little bit of facts about the diaspora community. There are 30 million people like me who live outside the US. Of course, the US diaspora is about 4 million, is considered the most successful diaspora. But we have very successful diaspora in the UK, in Canada, in Dubai, and Singapore, and many other places. So our goal is over the next several years, we want to double the giving and impact that this community makes, both to the countries we live in, we made our money in, but also to contribute to causes in India. So that's the goal we have set at Indiaspora. So then the question is, how do we go about actually achieving this goal? So the first thing we did was to have a summit. So we said, let's get donors, nonprofits, foundations, and others together to start discussing the issues, to bring issues to the forefront. So we have an annual philanthropy summit. This is held usually around Gandhi Jayanti. And we get many, this year we had, for example, Ramesh Wadhwani, who is an Indian-American billionaire, who's also signed the Gates Giving Pledge to come and inspire us. So we also had, for example, Vidya Shah, who heads up Edelgive, to come and talk. So we have all these inspiring people come talk to us. We have NGOs work with us, and so on and so forth. The other thing Indiaspora has done to further the cause of philanthropy is to get all the Indian organizations who are set up in the US, who give to India. We wanted to get that group together. That group didn't think of themselves as friends. They thought of themselves as competitors. For example, an organization you're familiar with called Pratham. There's another organization here called Akshaya Patra, Ekal Vidyalaya. So many of these organizations, AIF, America India Foundation and stuff, used to all work by themselves. But what Indiaspora did, we invested in a group called the India Philanthropy Alliance, or IPA. This is a group now of 15 organizations that primarily collects money in the US and gives that money to India to get together in the US so that they can work together to increase the pie. Right now, the pie of giving to India through these organizations is not that much. It's only about between 125 and 150 million dollars come through these organizations like Pratham and Akshaya Patra and others to India. And the goal is to start increasing the money. And the only way to do that is to talk about India, to talk about why India needs money, to talk about how we can help India, not just within the Indian American community, but with the greater American community, foundations and others who are willing to write checks for good causes to India. So that is another investment Indiaspora has made, is to get the India Philanthropy Alliance going, and for these organizations to work with each other to increase the mind share amongst the American public and to get more money for good causes in India. The next thing we do here is called an online program called Chalo Give. And Chalo Give started 3 years ago, and we said, how can we get the greater Indian American population? There are about 4 million Indians who live in the United States. And many of them, can't give $10,000 and $100,000, but they can afford to give $10, $20, $50, $100 to causes. So we started this online campaign where you can go to a website and you can donate to an organization of your choice. So we did this 2 years ago around Gandhi Jayanti. Again, we are working and inspired by a big program in India that's called Daan Utsav that a lot of you are familiar with, where Indian Americans around Gandhi Jayanti for a whole week volunteer, give money, and do projects around seva and giving back. So we were inspired by that. There's also a program in the US called Giving Tuesday, where around the Thanksgiving Tuesday, people just donate money online. And last year, you won't believe it, in the US, it's become such a success. $400 million got donated in one day to organizations in the US. So our aspiration is Chalo Give one day will result in millions of dollars being given to charity. Right now, we had Chalo Give this year, totally focused on the COVID relief. So when COVID hit, our members came to us and said, we have to do something. And we have to do something for people in the US where we live, but also to people in India. So we focused around hunger because we said one of the things that happens around COVID and around crises is people go hungry. So we ended up picking two organizations. We picked an organization in the US called Feeding America that works with 200 food banks around the US to give food to people who are hungry. And in India, we picked a great organization called Goonj that you're very familiar with, who was delivering, ration kits to migrant workers. So using these two organizations, in diaspora raised $1.2 million that enabled 8 million meals to be given to migrant workers and to hungry people in the US. So that is our way of raising money, coming up with a cause, and actually delivering. It shows the character of the Indian American community. When there's a crisis, people actually gave money to a cause. So again, that was another way for us to show how we can be philanthropic, to be a role model. If we step back for a minute and look at Indian Americans and how they give money in the US, this is a very interesting journey that we are undertaking. In the US, I believe right now, about $400 million is donated each year to causes, $400 million. The Americans are very generous people. They're also generous because they get a tax deduction too. And I'm sure in India, it's the same way. So we said, how is this $400 million being given and donated and used? So we tried to do the same look into the Indian American community. Where does money go in the Indian American community to causes, other than remitting money to India and stuff? So you will be surprised that the biggest amount of money amongst Indian Americans has gone to temples. And for good reason. We never had temples when we came here. We decided that we needed to build temples. But again, the money given to temples in the US, you will be surprised, we estimate is over the last 20 years. And this is a number that will be a big number. It's between $5 and $10 billion have been given to temples. But it's not a surprise. We looked at American numbers. We went back 40, 50 years and looked at numbers of giving to churches in the United States. 50 years ago, 2/3 of the money donated in India in the US went to religious causes. Over time, people get enlightened. They go, there's more than religion. There's education. There are other causes like healthcare, hunger relief, so on and so forth. So the Americans now have gone from 2/3 of giving to religious causes, which is primarily to churches. Fast forward 40, 50 years, they only give 1/3 to churches and causes. 2/3 of the money now goes to other relief. So the Indian American community, if you look at a continuum, we started with temples. We have now moved to education because, as you know, education is so important to Indians, and we in the US have the same ethos. We want our kids to be doctors and lawyers and engineers and successful educators and so forth. So we then went to find out how much money has gone to education. How much money have Indian Americans donated to educational causes? And this is also a surprisingly high number. Indian Americans have given $1.2 billion in the last 20 years to institutions of higher learning, to universities in the US. So we now see Indian Americans moving from temples to education to other causes. So we see that in diaspora's role is to educate people so they keep moving down this continuum and giving to healthcare, giving to hunger, giving to other causes that will help society as a whole in the US and also in India. So that's the journey that Indian Americans are taking today. So in diaspora's role is to be a platform, to be a force to educate people, to inspire people, to motivate people, and get Indian Americans to give, because I'm looking at it also selfishly, right? When there's a crisis in the US, you want people to look at Indian Americans as people to go to, not a group to say, these are the stingy people, We want to be known as givers and not takers. We come to the US, we work, we save money, and we don't give back. So that is one of Indiaspора's role, is to project how Indian Americans are giving back. So we have a report that details how $1.2 billion has gone to education. The next thing Indiaspora is doing to inspire the entire diaspora is we are now undertaking a philanthropy leaders list. So we are now working worldwide, including India, US, UK, Canada, Dubai, Singapore, all these different countries, to identify Indians in the diaspora who have been givers. And in the first quarter of next year, we'll be releasing a report, a list of philanthropists in the diaspora. Again, we hope people like Ramesh Wadhwani and others who have signed the Giving Pledge will be the inspiring people who will motivate the entire community to give more. So with that, I will shut up and I will turn the floor back to Ganesh to see if there are any questions, any comments. Happy to really answer any questions if I can.
Sure. Thanks a lot, Amar. And any of you have questions that you can feel free to either ask directly or maybe post it on the chat. But Amar, I do have a question, and that's something that's always fascinated me about the way you work and Sanjeev and your team in Indiaspora work. I mean, the ability to integrate members in politics, members in business, members in philanthropy, also integrate, as you said, people like Anshu from Gunj and so many others. So how do you do that? Because I find that in India, I mean, even till about 5 years back when I started Pune City Connect, we all had this very big suspicion of politicians and say, oh, we don't want to work with the politicians. And, we always felt that whatever we do, we should do by ourselves. So what makes the mindset much more open in terms of collaborating, even with politicians, if I may use the word, and of course, academic researchers?
No, it's a good question. I mean, what we found was if we can marry policy along with things we're doing, it just speeds up the whole process, So it was mainly, and the good news is Indiaspora is a nonprofit. In the US, a nonprofit cannot write checks to any politician. So we're happy because if they come to us, we say, look, legally, we cannot give you any money. So they come to us as part of the community, right? So initially, there's that trust factor that they're not coming to us for money, okay? So that's one. And privately, we can write checks to them, but there's no expectation on that. So when we started encouraging politicians, the reason is to give them input and give them feedback, right? As to how policy can be directed. And the good thing in the US is, policy does yield results. Look at it this way, $400 billion got given to charity last year because there's a tax deduction, right? The motivation was, hey, I can take it off my income tax. So there are many, many things that policymakers can do to kind of grease the skids, if you will, right? So they definitely are part of the ecosystem. They need to help us. So that is one thing. The other thing at Indiaspora is we have a no selling code of conduct. Anybody sells, they're disinvited from the Indiaspora network. So businessmen can't come in looking for favors. Politicians can't come in looking for money. Academics can't come in with a motive. Everybody comes in for the greater good of the community or they get disinvited. So we have a very, very strict rule. And we have done that in the past. We had someone in the wealth management space and in the insurance space try to come and sell insurance policies. Unfortunately, we had to not have them come back. So we have established this group as a group that is trusting of each other and things that are for the greater good of the community. So once we establish the value system of Indiaspora, people get it. It was the initial, what is the value of the network?
I see. But I mean, in that sense, and Zalem, do you want to ask your question directly? Because Zalem has asked a question on how do you ensure that money is used for the right cause? Zalem, you just want to elaborate on that? Yeah. Go ahead, Zalem.
I mean, how do you choose the community? It is absolutely trust that what you said, and that's how you ensure that money is used for right cause, because in India, many a times it is not used for the right cause. So that's what my question is. How do you ensure
So I think, can you elaborate on that, Emar? I mean, in terms of how do you really ensure that, I mean, whatever
Yeah,
you,
very good question. Very good question. So two things we do. One, in working with organizations like in India, like Give India, they do some kind of basic audit and basic scrutiny of these organizations. That's one basic thing we check off, right? Hey, what does Give India think about the organization if they are in the Give India database, right? The second and more important thing we found is to look for donors of those organizations, right? So we look behind Gunj. Who is behind donating to Gunj? Are they people like Nandan and Rohini Nilekani? Are they people who are, the citizens who are well regarded in that field? Same thing in the US, if someone is giving to an organization, who are the donors? Let's go talk to those donors. Let's find out how they did their due diligence and stuff like that. Because we felt if Nandan is writing 1 crore check, I feel, I can write a 1 lakh check, I feel like I can trust that, right? So it's a combination of things. And so far it has worked out. We have not, touch wood, gone into any kind of issues with these organizations. So again, like I said, we do the first level of trust is, have they been audited? Have they been given a chit of good conduct? Second is, do we know donors who have worked with these organizations, who can vouch for them and have actually written big checks for them, And so that's how we've done it so far. There's no real, I wish there was a better way to do it. We don't know that, but so far it's worked out well.
And how is this community increasing, at what rate, and is there a goal so that this community increases in India and in US?
Our community is very, very small. We are only 150 members in the US, but they're the right 150 people. And then we have a greater community of thousands of people that we reach out to. So the core community, you can see all this on our website. They're leading business people, academics, lawyers, doctors, and so on and so forth. And like I said, our goal over the next several years is to double the giving. So we have a baseline from a couple of years ago. We're going to start measuring that every so often to see that indeed giving is going up. But again, we can make a difference just by getting people to even give $10. What we found was if someone gives $10, next year they give $20. It's that first check that an individual writes is the most important thing.
Yes. Thank you so much. It was great listening to you. Thank you.
So Emar, on a related sense, do you also work with, let's say, the Aspens and the BMGF and the Michael Susandel Foundation? Because those guys have significant due diligencing in India. And when they choose something to fund, maybe like you said, one could be Rohini and Nandan, for instance. But you also work with American entities which are already doing grant making in India?
We do. We have contacts at Dell Foundation and Omidyar and Acumen and all these groups. Okay. But again, a lot of these things, you have to do multiple checks, right? So they're one. Dasra is another organization in India that's very close with us. So it's Give India, Dasra, and all these foundations. That's part of the thing. But I think what helps us the most is finding a donor more than anything else. If Susan Dell Foundation says we're writing $1 million check, people kind of feel like, okay, I can write a small check. These big guys have done the homework, So it absolutely is helpful. It's very helpful if there's actually a face to that person, If it's a Rohini Nilekani, or if it's a Premji or whoever it is, Tata Trust, they are big names that people believe in and will go the extra mile,
Got it. Vikram, you had a question?
Yes, thank you. Emar, we've been listening to how you've got the Indian diaspora up and giving, and you've got a goal to double your giving. I think that's a phenomenal goal to have, and that's a very powerful community out there. We've been watching what the Indian government has been doing in the last couple of years, and they're making it more and more difficult for foreign contributions to come into India. The most recent is the Indian Foreign Contribution Regulation Act, and that virtually, is like a 50% dampener on whatever was already happening. Now, granted, there would be the bad eggs in those in all those baskets of foreign contributions that are coming in. But what they've really done is they've sort of locked the entire stable because one horse was stolen, and now nobody else can get out there to ride. So what's your opinion or impression on that, keeping in mind that it is now no longer legal for an entity receiving money in India to give that money in smaller parcels to other smaller communities or entities that are doing philanthropy or social work? They have to do every nut and bolt of that activity themselves, and they cannot finance or fund anybody else. That's the long and short of the new law. And of course, it's highly restrictive, and you're under a CIA kind of scanner all the time with your personal assets and bank accounts being looked at constantly and reported upon constantly.
Yeah, good question. I mean, this is an ongoing challenge for us. I mean, that's why we created this India Philanthropy Alliance. So this consists of organizations like Pratham, Akshaya Patra. These are brand names that you cannot find fault at all, right? So we're collecting all those groups to be an alliance, which can go work with the government, which can go try to influence policy and so forth. But it needs to come from both sides, It needs to come from large Indian entities, large Indian givers like the Premjis and others, to also kind of, have their voice. At the same time, international groups and others need to also voice their concerns. I think it needs to be something that needs to be done on both sides. I know this is brand new, and a lot of our people are examining these rules and so forth. But, that's something we have to work through. And there's no easy recourse. I don't have an answer. This has all happened very recently. The only thing I can think of is, can Indian donors band together from India and say, hey, look, these laws need to be, the policy needs to be different, because we also need money from overseas, and look at the kind of money coming in and point out to the good actors. There'll always be bad actors, but yeah, like you said, you cannot stop all the good actors just because there's one bad actor. I think I'm hoping and hopeful that over the next several months that these things will be modified once people have made it clear to them that there are major challenges of donating, 10,000 to one entity and 20,000 to a different entity. And those organizations don't have FCRA, and how do you deal with that? And, I think we just need to, lobby, in a sense. That's what we would do in the US, is there would be a lobbyist who goes to the government and starts, educating the government on the real issues. Yeah. So it's going to be hard. All our organizations are impacted by this now. I don't have a good answer.
Do you think it's a viable option to have to actually institutionalize giving to India, from the diaspora abroad, by saying that gift this money to your family and have them gift it to the NGO of your choice, because that bypasses the FCRA regulation? And I don't think it would be illegal to do that. It would be perfectly okay to send money to your brother in India and say, I want you to give it to so and so because this is what I intended for, and that the rules don't. But we need to institutionalize it, or create a system to do that transparently, so that that's not abused as well.
That is not going to work, because one of the major incentives in the US is to get the tax deduction. Okay.
Right.
I write a check to Akshaya Patra in the US, I get 50% of it deducted from my tax. Okay.
Right.
If that is not there, donations will absolutely come down from 400 billion in the US to maybe 200 billion in the US. You will see a huge fall if that tax deduction is removed. As you know, I mean, the big motivation in all this is I'm doing good, but I'm also saving taxes. Okay. So you cannot, if I send it to my brother in India, there's no tax deduction for me. I will not do that.
I get it. Yeah.
That's
so the key incentive is the tax deduction, and that really drives donations.
Absolutely. Look at this, right? Silicon Valley entrepreneur makes 5 million in an exit. He's willing to give $500,000 to Indians, right? Because he goes, it's only 250K. I get the other 250K back. right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they're willing to do that. And it's ingrained in our culture in the US. Set up a foundation, donate money, you get a big tax break. It's like in the US and India too, right? You get a tax break if you have a mortgage on your apartment or condominium or whatever, right? House. Same thing, it's set up in our psyche that you get a deduction. If you don't get the deduction, you're not going to do it.
All right. Thank you.
Vikram, you were talking about this yesterday. We had this scare in our NASSCOM group because there was a new thing that they said Niti Aayog was going to do, that anybody who set up a philanthropic organization in India who doesn't have a formal government social degree will go to jail. So a lot of us were joking that, look, we'll all meet in Tihar jail because none of us have a formal social background and still we do a lot of social work. Then fortunately, we checked up with Amitabh Kant and Niti Aayog and he said, don't
That's not true.
go fake news. You never know what will
That's
come
not
up next.
But I must tell you that all of this fake news is a reaction to really what is happening, and what's happening here is that there is a complete squeeze on foreign donation, and the goal of the government seems to be not to make sure that the donation is directed in the right direction or put in the right place, but to squeeze it out altogether and to ensure that Indian NGOs are only dependent on Indian government largesse, and that's really where it's going right now.
Communism at its best.
Yeah, I think the issue in the US is, if that stops, we'll end up donating to organizations in the US. And that's okay with us in a sense that we made our money. We're making our money in the US. We live in the US. So we may be forced ultimately to only give to the Red Cross and United Way and all the organizations that do business in the US, But we hope that doesn't happen. We hope a big chunk of our money comes to India. And we want to help our homeland where we were born and got educated and so on and so forth. And by the way, over the next decade, one of the other things I forgot to mention is there are 100,000 new Indian citizens of Indian origin in the US. So every year, 1 lakh Indians are becoming US citizens. So again, that pool of money that could potentially come to India is increasing every year by 1 lakh people becoming citizens of the US. Okay. Over the next year, we think 1 million new citizens of Indian origin will be citizens of the US. Okay. So
Yeah, but
all this means that India better open up that the conduit so we can actually send money to India.
no, we don't like that. We don't like getting donations from other people. We don't like receiving help, and we want to go out of our way to block those kind of donations. And we're going to put in place regulation that will make it so difficult to do things that nobody will want to do anything here anyway.
Hey, Vikram, go back into your cage.
I'm a US citizen. I can't opine on Indian laws. I only donate to India. So if that donation is not there, I'll donate to some cause in the US. I still today give to causes in the US and India. I'll just give all the money to causes in the US. And we have plenty of causes here.
That's exactly what we were afraid of.
Poverty. One more thing that brings up, I wanted to give you some details on. Everybody thinks all Indian Americans are affluent. And one of the things we found recently is we did a study with Johns Hopkins University to look at poverty in the US. And much to our shock, we found that there are 250,000, 2.5 lakhs of Indians who live below the poverty line in the US. Shocking number.
Oh, really?
Okay. And we think because of COVID, that could increase to 10% of the Indian population. So we now have to take care of Indian Americans who live below the poverty line. These are Uber drivers, convenience store clerks, motel maids. These are people who are making less than the poverty rate, which is shocking because the average income of the Indian is $120,000 a year, which means the low point must be $10,000 a year, which is something that people cannot even survive. So we have brought attention this Diwali to this population, and we're saying, hey, find people in your community who are Indians who are below the poverty line, and please do something for them as well. Poverty is, even in the US, is 10% of the population is poor.
Quite right.
That brings me to the the question that I've been threatening to ask you. I mean, most of us have family in the US. I have a daughter in New York, and I'm sure most people have brothers, sisters, nephews, nieces in America. So tell us a little bit about what excites you about the new Biden-Harris prospect.
So give you a little bit of backdrop in this. Indian Americans have been, like I said, we were one of the people behind getting Indian Americans to give money to politicians, to run for office. And this has now become a virtuous cycle. And this year is, I think, the year that Indian Americans made it, came of age in the US. So we had between 200 to 300 Indians run for office in the US. You won't believe it. It's a big number. This is for school board, city council, state assembly, Senate, Congress, all kinds of roles. 200 to 300 people. And we cannot even keep track. So in diaspora couldn't keep track. We lost track of the count. Okay, that is one. Second thing is Indian Americans have given tens of millions of dollars to the campaigns on both sides. We have thousands of volunteers who worked for the Trump campaign, who worked for the Biden campaign. So our community has really got invested in the political movement, right? That was one. And the crowning thing was the vice presidential candidate, Kamala Harris, right? Because it was a dream. When I came to the United States, 40 some years ago, I never even thought someone would be of Indian origin in anything, right? To think we have a vice president of the US, elector of the US, who's of Indian origin is shocking, positively, right? So I think, all this has culminated in the community really getting involved, which is great because, in any country, you have to be in the political system if you want any influence, right? So now in diaspora is doing yet another list because we want to project our strength in all the communities. So besides the philanthropy list, the other list we're working on is diaspora politicians, right? There are about Indian diaspora in about 30, 40 countries in the world, right? The 30 million people reside in 30 to 40 countries. So again, we are just doing our initial survey and research. We're shocked. And I'll give you some preliminary results. There are about 70 people of Indian origin as ministers or above in the diaspora, 70. Canada has 4 ministers. UK has 2 or 3 cabinet level people. US, we have 1. And you take Suriname, Guyana, Fiji, South Africa, Singapore. There are so many people of Indian origin. That list will be coming out in January as well. Again, to show and project the strength that Indian diaspora are members of the political community wherever they live, So that is the extent of how successful the diaspora is becoming, whether it's Singapore or South Africa or Suriname or US or Canada or UK, So I think this is something the community has to do in any country we live, right? Because keep in mind, when the Trump came, immediately we noticed a hate crime increase in the Indian community, right? And that tragic death of Srinivas a few years ago when he was shot in a bar and all that stuff. I mean, none of that stuff used to happen. It happened once when 9/11 happened. It happened again when Trump became president. So these are times when we need political support. We need to call our congressmen. We need to call senators and say, hey, look, there are hate crimes. There are so many of my friends in the Bay Area and other places. These are kids of my friends. They were standing in line at Starbucks and some lady came and said, go home. And this kid looks perplexed and says, I was born in the US. This is my home. So we need to be politically influential to protect ourselves as well, selfishly, against hate crimes that can happen in any country in the world,
So now that India is very close to both Nikki Haley and to Kamala Harris, so are we in a good place to elect the next president of the US?
That is the dream, right? In 2024, maybe Biden retires or something because he's 82 years old. Maybe the 2 candidates could be Kamala Harris and Nikki Haley. And I mean, just imagine the Indian press and all of you guys in India following that election, right? Even with this one, it was huge.
We'll have North versus South politics in India.
Exactly. Punjabi versus, South Indian.
Well, thank you very much, Amar. I think that was absolutely fascinating. Colonel, would you like to say something?
Yeah, thank you. In fact, it was a wonderful talk and one-to-one interaction. There is a lot of takeaway, Amar, and we feel really blessed to have you today morning. So, and I would like to thank Ganesh also to connect MR, and to do a formal vote of thanks. I would like to invite Rotary Vikram Puri, Honorable Member, Advisory Board, Rotary Club of Pune Riverside. So over to Vikramji.
MR, thank you so much for being with us this morning. I think we've had a very insightful 45 minutes into how the Indian diaspora lives and thinks, especially in the United States. And we are actually very happy to see that you're very connected and very much on top of things. I think your knowledge of how things work in India and how your money is being spent and how you acquire that knowledge are all rooted in very practical and down to earth, simple homework, as we would put it here. We are also very mindful of the fact that you have focused on political advocacy in the US. That is something that is missing in India with the NGOs. I think we simply do not influence policy, and we simply do not try and influence policy because our political lines seem to be drawn differently here, and that's something that we haven't been able to tackle very well. But thank you for spending your time with us this morning. I think it was very useful for us, and we've all learned a lot. And especially thank you to Ganesh for getting somebody like MR to speak to us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Vikram. In fact, Vikram, you have to do one more honor. This Thought of the Week is a healthy tradition of Rotary Club Pune Riverside. So I invite you for that, for Thought of the Week. Over to Vikram again.
Well, I can only think of something. I'm not one for being philosophical or insightful, but I just think that getting somebody to give and getting them to give by way of a champion is the right way. That's how MR said. So if a thought leader writes a check, he creates many thought leaders and many more checks.
True words of wisdom. Great. Thank you, Vikram. This joke of the week is also one of the healthy tradition of Rotary Club Pune Riverside. So I would like to invite Sandeep ji, who is with us. So over to Sandeep ji.
Good morning, everybody. I hope I'm loud and clear.
Yes.
This morning for us, and MR, I believe you are at the US, so it's evening for you. So good evening to you. And I hope you understand Hindi a little bit, right?
Yes.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. So this morning has all been about questions, and so many questions which can't be answered. And I have a couple of questions, which may probably tickle you. Let me ask these. किसी को मालूम है ये गलतियों पे डालने वाला पर्दा कहाँ मिलता है और कपड़ा कितना लगेगा? अच्छा, एक और बात
Yes.
धोखा खाने के बाद पानी पी सकते हैं क्या? अगर किसी से चिकनी चुपड़ी बातें करनी हो तो कौन सा घी सही रहेगा? किसी को पता है क्या? पाप को हमेशा घड़े में ही क्यों भरते हैं? ठंडा रहता है क्या? ये दिल पे रखने वाला पत्थर कहाँ मिलता है और वो कितने किलो का होता है? किसी के जख्मों पे अगर नमक छिड़कना हो तो कौन सा सही रहेगा, टाटा का या पतंजलि का? अच्छा, एक और बात, जो लोग कहीं के नहीं रहते वो बेचारे कहाँ रहते हैं? सब लोग इज्जत की रोटी कमाना चाहते हैं, लेकिन कोई इज्जत की सब्जी क्यों नहीं कमाता भाई? भाड़ में जाने के लिए ऑटो ठीक रहेगा या टैक्सी अच्छी रहेगी? अच्छा, एक बात और पूछनी थी, ये जो इज्जत का सवाल होता है ये कितने नंबर का होता है? कुछ और भी सवाल है, अगली बार पूछूंगा. थैंक यू सो मच.
थैंक यू वेरी मच. इसका आंसर देने के लिए बहुत टाइम लगने वाला है. सो थैंक यू Sandeep bhai. It's already 9:29, so not taking much time. Once again, thanking MR for joining us today morning, and all the other guests who have joined today morning. And I also would like to thank all the members who have been quite regular in joining our meeting. So stay healthy, happy, safe, and blessed. And allow me to adjourn the meeting. Should I?
Thank you, Amar. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah.
Okay.
Th-
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. Thank
Take
you.
care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good day. Bye.
Bye.